Welcome, Tom. Thanks for coming on the podcast. I've wanted to have you on probably since maybe the first time I experienced WildPlay Element Parks, or one of the times we had extreme experiences together, whether it's going around the old track out in Langford, drifting, or any number of things. So I really appreciate getting a chance to talk to you about doing business on Vancouver Island.
Yeah, super psyched to be here.
Where did you grow up and how did you end up on Vancouver Island?
I grew up all over Canada. My dad was in the RCMP, so it was like in those days, RCMP were moved pretty frequently. So I didn't really, I had to become pretty resilient actually. It was every 3 years, every 4 years, you were moving to a new city or some new place, and came to Vancouver Island for the last year of high school and just fell in love with everything. I was already pretty outdoorsy, but coming here was just like, yeah, this is heaven, Mecca.
Yeah. And where was your last stop in high school before, and which high school did you end up at?
Well, before I was here, I was in Ottawa, and I was at St. Pius X, which actually was, unfortunately, there was a shooting there. So just before I left. And here I went to Mount Doug High School.
What was kind of the big outdoor aha that you had here, or when did that happen?
Well, the long story of that is actually, as a result of some of the things that happened in Ottawa, I found myself kind of searching for my reason for being on the planet. And when I came to the West Coast and started to I think I immersed myself in outdoor activities here just as part of just a good release, a healthy way of going forward. And I think I have an issue with that. Like if I'm going to go do something, I get all the way in. So climbing, backcountry travel, you name it. I kept going hardcore into that. And it became, no matter what I did in all kinds of other responsible jobs, it was still always calling me in the background. And I finally just started leaning into it all the way, and both in terms of my career and my personal play life. So, yeah.
Cool. Where did you climb on Vancouver Island, and where were your summiting spots?
On Vancouver Island, in terms of summiting on Vancouver Island, if you were to hold my record up against most of the local mountaineers, I would suck because I didn't really I did a lot of climbing here that was, rock climbing, or a lot of backcountry travel up in Strathcona Park, a lot of wilderness travel. But the bulk of my climbing, like hardcore sort of mountaineering when I was working as a mountain guide, was in the Coast Range, in the Canadian Rockies, down rock climbing in Yosemite, all these different places all over North America. Not as much here on the island. The island for me was more of a wilderness travel place. And I think still to this day, it's like what I most appreciate about the island is if you took someone that was, used to climbing in Europe and you brought them to Vancouver Island, they'd be like, what the heck? Where's the mountain? Like, you have so much bushwhacking just to even find, what the heck you're going to climb up. So I really love that. And it's still that way. You can go up on the North Island and not see a human, for days. And it's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty special. I grew up in Courtenay and Strathcona. I don't spend enough time up there, but it's a beautiful spot for any type of wilderness adventure you want to take on.
Yeah, totally.
And did you have a couple of jobs in guiding here on Vancouver Island, or once again with your guiding career and your professional career that got you into WildPlay, was that jobs off Vancouver Island?
Yeah, that's interesting. I worked in retail. I did a bunch of things that were, I'd done so many things. Like it was, I worked in trades, siding, insulating, like everything. A shoemaker's apprentice, like I had a cajillion funky things that I did. A plumber's apprentice, but it just was like, no. And I think that's good. It's a good thing to go do all those things. But I kind of started gravitating towards retail because it allowed me the most flexibility in what I wanted to do in my playtime. And I ended up working for an outdoor store called Island Alpine Equipment many years ago on Vancouver Island. And through that, I started teaching rock climbing and doing that kind of stuff. And then pretty much right from there, I started a company called Slipstream Adventures. And myself and a couple of friends ran that thing for 10, 11 years. And we were, one of the largest, if not the largest, certainly the largest on Vancouver Island, but one of the largest guiding companies on the West Coast and of Canada. And, that was a big part of what I did for a long time. I had other things that I had to do, on the side. I did a lot of tech work, graphic design, and sometimes I would sell computers or whatever just to make up cash in the off season, but a lot of guiding work. That took me through to early 2000. Yeah.
Okay, interesting. So no snow alpine guiding during that, and it's a small season here anyways.
Well, no. I was guiding, winter guiding. I was doing a lot of ice climbing guiding. I did some ski guiding. I was never a certified ski guide. I ended up, supporting other guides on their trips. In fact, guides that were working for me, I would go and support them as kind of their gopher. That was great. But I was also, I had a family, and being gone, being a guide, a full-time guide, can have you gone a lot, especially if you're going to the mountains and leaving Vancouver Island. So yeah, I tended to not do that much winter guiding, but yeah, I spent a lot of time in big snowy mountains, Mount Waddington, all those places. Yeah.
Cool, good. And did you wind down your first company and get right into WildPlay? Tell us a little bit about that transition, and where was your first park or operation, if it was a different iteration?
So the transition was actually a little bit more complex than that. I ended up leaving guiding and ended up starting a national risk management program, which I failed miserably at. It was a great idea, but I made a couple of pretty good mistakes and learned a good lesson and lost my shirt. And then I ended up working for a tech company, and I think I was good at building teams, and I built a fantastic team there. I worked with some really fantastic people, and I learned a lot over the ensuing 4 years about global business. We had software that was all over the world. I think at one point we had 24 million users of our software.
Was that ACD or?
ACD, yeah. I was the director of e-business there. So kind of the interface between the software and the back-end systems, et cetera. It was a really great experience. And then at one point, much of the senior management of the company was given their walking papers, which was like perfect in my life at that point, because I had a lot of things I wanted to do, and there were things going on with my family that needed my time. So at that point, I decided that I was going to go and do another technology gig. And my now business partner and good friend Gord Ross said, hey, I've got this other idea. What do you think about this? What if we went and started creating these adventure activities for people? He and I had worked as guides together for many years. And I did the modeling on it. It looked like a terrible idea on paper. Not a terrible idea. It looked like a hard business to make work. And it has been a hard business. It's been a very difficult business. But I probably leaned into like, what does my heart tell me? What do I want to give my life to? And that made a lot more sense than kind of the other path. So picked this path, and off we went. And our first location for WildPlay was in Nanaimo. It wasn't supposed to be. That was just by fluke. We went up there to look at buying a steel fabrication plant so that we could mass produce with this great idea that we had to take over the world, with these adventure parks. And the guy said, hey, that guy's selling his bungee jumping operation across the river. And we went and talked to him and ended up buying what was an old bungee jumping operation that wasn't doing very well, and turned it around, adding new product and changing the whole brand experience and creating a family environment, et cetera, et cetera. And that became the first WildPlay. And then we just started from there, and away we went on a march. Yeah.
Great. Yeah. So interesting, not going down the broker route and having a vision, but acquiring your first asset. How long did you have that before you started your next part?
Oh man, if we're going to start getting into tiny details,
just roughly, and then
I'll probably fail you.
Take us through your growth on the island, and then maybe off. So just one of the big things I like to focus on the Business Vancouver Island podcast is doing business here and how it's slightly different, but then also the journey off the island, because many of us, in order to make a real business, have to start expanding.
Yeah, and it's interesting actually. I think there's an interesting thing in all of that, which is, we started in Nanaimo. We opened in Victoria out in the West Shore, Juanafuca, a smaller operation. And that was super interesting because, you've got this one thing and you think, yeah, I've got that kind of figured out. Let's go do another one. And the second one is not what, like, it's just, there's a lot more to that expansion. And the third one, so we're Maple Ridge, Whistler. I mean, frankly, we've done something like 22 operations, but we've closed some, we've sold some, yeah, it's like we've made mistakes, all the way along the way. But I think what we ended up doing was kind of getting it more dialed and more survivable, and then we took it off and moved off into other locations. The third location was probably the hardest, right? I think when you're expanding, it's something about that third location. It's like it's breaking some barrier in terms of what your systems have to be able to do, what your team has to be able to do. It was pretty crazy learning. Vancouver Island has probably been the best place, though, in terms of doing business. And as time has gone by, we look at the business's maturity. We have operations in Niagara Falls and New York State. Great. And we've built for other people. We've done builds as far away as the Caribbean, Jamaica. We've done stuff for other operators, the suspension bridge at the gondola, Sea to Sky gondola, all that kind of, like, we've done all kinds of funky technical things. But at the end of the day, this is still the place that I most prefer to do business, and certainly on the West Coast. And Vancouver Island is actually a fantastic place to do business. The mindset, the people, everything here is certainly for our business is more in tune with that. People are pretty healthy and pretty oriented. They're oriented to nature and they want to get out and go do these things. So yeah. I love Vancouver Island for doing business, actually. Yeah.
Good. And I imagine, and hearing the experience of other people, that the West Shore, Langford, and the growth they've had there, it's easier to grow a business in a growing community.
Yeah. I mean, if it was shrinking, that would be brutal. Yeah, I mean, that was interesting because what we knew that when we opened up that site, we would cannibalize our business in Nanaimo. And so it was a bit of a risk. We went, okay, we had this opportunity. It was kind of interesting because it was we were looking at Bear Mountain. Bear Mountain had been talking with us about going and putting something in at Bear Mountain, and they weren't really sure what they were going to do. They were just poking around at a bunch of stuff, and that was great. And we were kind of used to that. There was a lot of, we were not, like, if you look at our industry, it's pretty fledgling industry. It's not an old industry, and folks are just like, do we want to do something like that? It's still that way. And that ended up not working out, both on our part and theirs. But folks who were involved in that exploration were also involved in some of the political leadership in the West Shore communities. And they kind of brought us into this collective recreation thing and said, we think it would be great to do this in the Juanafuca area. We decided to do that. It definitely took a hit. Our Nanaimo business took a hit to do it. But it was the right move because the West Shore is growing and because, tourism and et cetera in this community is great. What's interesting is our business is not really a tourism business. Yes, we serve tourists, but 90% of our business is kind of like, we're like a rec center of sorts. We're a recreational activity for locals, which has its advantages and its disadvantages. The advantages are that for us, because we're very much a values-driven business, it really fits for what we do, and we can see the difference that we make. But it also means that your pricing structures have to be, kind of different. Oftentimes when it's a tourism-oriented business, the business can actually charge more money, and sometimes it's maybe not even, a respectful amount of money, but that's you see that in a lot of markets. That doesn't fly with locals. And quite frankly, if you look at our pricing now, we're probably $5 more than we were, 20 years ago. This is our 20th anniversary this year, and we're not really that much more expensive. And the market can't really bear that much more, especially now with, what we're seeing in terms of inflation and the cost of living for folks. So we're trying really hard to just stay accessible. Yeah.
Yeah. And speaking of growing communities, I don't want to pry into any growth plans, but how does the North Island, I know growth was forecast to be quite high, but it's slowed at certain times. But how does the North Island, any plans on or locations that interest you?
You know, we've definitely walked some property up north. You know, we've been in the Courtenay community. We've been in, Cathedral Grove at one point, looking at the potential to do a big nature-oriented exploration up there. I think that the issue is that you've got to have the traffic. And even though there's lots of growth there, I'd say we're probably getting there. Like you'll probably see us somewhere on the North Island or, North-ish Island at some point pretty soon. We've definitely been in discussions with different municipalities or people that have a business interest or landowners that want us to come up and take a look at it. And I suspect you'll see that happening within the next 5 years. But it's got to, everyone thinks, build it and they'll come. It's not been our experience. It's kind of like, hopefully there's already enough there that's going to sustain the business and away you go. That being said, it's got a lot of, if someone's patient, then it's not crazy to get out ahead of what you can see as the obvious growth and traffic that's happening in an area. So
yeah, it's interesting. I don't know how many rentals are being built in Campbell River and Comox and Courtenay, but I mean, you definitely need those stepping stones as far as housing, and you need. I mean, would you say you need 750,000 people in a market, or like what would be the ideal market for?
No, I don't think. Yeah,
that type of business.
Great. I mean, that'd be awesome. Not necessarily, though. I think probably 350, 400,000 people. You're probably. Yeah, a lot of it too depends on what else is in the market. It depends on whether or not that market sees a tourism balloon that happens. Like a seasonal visitation that happens can also be helpful. So yeah, there are places on the island that do see that. Certainly, Courtenay does, and so does Parksville, etc. Our Nanaimo operation serves most of those areas pretty well now, and it's a pretty big, it's got a lot of gravity to it, that location. There's a lot going on there, so it means that folks are willing to come there from quite a distance away.
And then the Nanaimo Park, it started with bungee. Do you have more there?
Oh, yeah. We started with bungee. The bungee operation there was, it was not doing particularly well, and they had gone into sort of a discounting death spiral. And the original guy that started that was a super, definitely a visionary, Kiwi guy that came, John Brown, super interesting fella. And they had a whole persona at the site. And when we looked at it, we went, well, in order to do this, we've got to add more product. We've got to actually create what we envision to be a brand that's a family brand, and the family brand that extends from, what some people might consider an extreme sport or extreme activity, bungee jumping, all the way through to, children's kind of aerial playground. So what we did was we built an adventure park there, and that park is kind of that adventure course that's there is kind of the flagship blueprint for what we've done in so many other locations. And there's a children's product there as well. Then we built a zip line across the river that goes across and then down the river. It's a spectacular location. Again, I've got to hand it to John Brown for having picked out this gem that is literally right off the highway. We have axe throwing up there. When we started, we had a restaurant, and it's not our core competency, and we couldn't really do a good job with that. And it was licensed, and, although you could make money selling alcohol, it didn't fit.
It's a hard business.
Well, it didn't fit our business, but also what we knew was like, hey, you know what? No matter what, people are going to have to drive here, and they're going to have to drive to leave here. So it didn't make sense to us to be feeding them alcohol when they were sitting at this thing that there was pretty much only one way in and out of there. And at that point, and even now, there was no public transportation. So yeah, we kiboshed that and just, stayed with our core. And I think that was a really good place for learning that lesson, to stay with your core competency and build on that. And we kind of went from there and did that. So yeah.
Good. And so the location is south of Nanaimo. Is that right?
Yeah, it's just south of Nanaimo.
And I'm thinking about partnerships, strategic partnerships with any other businesses. I don't imagine there's a lot of restaurants close by, but I mean, tell me, do you have any good strategic partners either at any of the island locations?
We do. I mean, at one point, so there was the Cassidy, there was a little restaurant pub thing at the Cassidy area, which is really close to where the park is. You know, if you were a danger junkie, you could run across the highway over to that. You might not make it back. That burnt down, and it's been replaced by another operator over there that has some great ice cream and all that kind of stuff. And so there is some stuff that can happen there, but it's kind of difficult because of the way the traffic works to link it up. We definitely work with different folks that'll come and bring food to the site. We've done food truck stuff as well when we're super busy. And we have a really great working relationship with Horn Lake Caves as well. So we do some collaborative promotions with those folks where, you know, we sell their tickets, they sell our tickets, and we also have packaging that we've done together. And we like doing that. We think it's great because folks can get a killer adventure day and just where they can go and do kind of all of our stuff and then go to Horn Lake Caves or go vice versa in a day. And it's like, whoa, that's just over the top. And it's definitely a big Vancouver Island experience. Yeah. The food thing is difficult. It's, and so the other thing is we just encourage people to bring food. We're, a lot of people poo-poo that, but we're like, no, come and have a picnic with your family. In fact, we're fine. Come and have a picnic with your family. You don't even need to come and spend money. Like, we don't really care. For us, it's just like, we consider ourselves to be an amenity, for the community. So
yeah,
you'll see. Yeah.
And I know you're really involved in Tourism BC and which tourism associations, and do people who come on tours, are there any packages or any providers that you join up with, or is that just part of your philanthropy of giving up your time and contributing to the community?
Mostly, it's my part of leaning into supporting the community. I was on the board of the Destination Greater Victoria for quite some time, and they've been, they're probably of the destination marketing associations or destination management associations. They've been the key leader on the island, I would say, or at least they've integrated with other. There was a Tourism Vancouver Island Association that was focused on very similar things. That's morphed in a way now, and I think they have an even better relationship. So I was on that board for many years, like 6-7 years or something like that. And then I have relationships with different tourism organizations across the country, whether that's Destination Canada or whatever. In terms of industry, like industry sales oriented or tour specific things, I'm actually not so aware of that because it doesn't really sit in my wheelhouse. And my team definitely does some of that with different operators, especially in places like Niagara Falls for sure. On Vancouver Island, there's a lot of folks that come year after year and bring their tours to our locations. There's one, I don't remember the name of it, but they're quite prolific and they do an awful lot. It's like Grizzly or something like that. And I apologize to whoever it is that I'm not remembering, but it's...
No, that's okay. That's good.
Super cool. Like, it's cool. They show up in a 12 passenger van, and they'll bring loads of folks, like van after van after van. And a lot of camps also come, like traveling camps or traveling remote traveling groups, whether it's, immersion groups or whatever, will show up at our parks as well and do that regularly, annually. So
what other businesses have you partnered with? I know on the manufacturing side, you partnered with Ray in the past.
Yeah, RT Prime for sure. Yeah. In fact, I'm going to go meet with Ray tomorrow. This is a trolley that kind of stuff is super cool when you are working with, Vancouver Island businesses that are doing huge, like amazing things, going into Ray's shops, like going into, I wouldn't say Darth Vader shop because Ray's way nicer than Darth Vader, but it's like it's like going into Star Wars, right? I mean, there's just so much stuff these people are making for folks all over the world. So yeah, RT Prime has been a really key place for us, and Ray and his team have been awesome. Some of the different entrepreneurs organization members, we've definitely had a relationship with different folks in there. I'm trying to think of of who else we've actually done stuff with, some of the different rigging companies, a lot of the product suppliers, Grey River Netting. Like there's a netting company on Vancouver Island that, builds nets for people all over the world. And it's like they're just killing it. And, we're lucky that we can just say, hey, we're heading up to, wherever we can drop by and pick up our nets that we use in our parks. They know us. They've built custom stuff for us. It's fantastic. So a lot of kind of the product suppliers, have been really, really valuable. People don't realize how much Vancouver Island punches above its weight, like not just on Vancouver Island, but, off Vancouver Island. And maybe that's kind of the mother of necessity, right? In that because if you just limited yourself to this market, it might make it super difficult. But I think a lot of these suppliers have had to learn, how to do it locally and take whatever they do, which is often kind of a perfected craft, and then sell it, either regionally or nationally or internationally. And they're doing an amazing job of that. And you'll see, that netting company as an example, you'll see their products, down in Florida or wherever, right? They're just, super on it. So it's kind of cool. Really cool.
And going back to that jumping off, if you looking back at all the ventures off Vancouver Island, what's like kind of the best market that was a cultural fit or an economic fit that you broke into?
Well, Vancouver, but that's pretty close. But Vancouver, but it's quite different. Yeah, it's different. And why? Because actually going to Vancouver, we've got a park in Maple Ridge, and we weren't really sure how that was going to go. But Maple Ridge is just such a family environment. And way more than we thought. In fact, we were trying to manage by the numbers and figure out, what's going on here, what's going on there. And Maple Ridge was throwing us off. We couldn't figure out what the heck was going on there because our numbers were just so skewed towards kids and family business. Like 80%. And we're like, what the heck? We hadn't planned on it, right? And in fact, we had to deal with issues because marketing was using this as such an example. People were starting to think we were just a kid's product, right? And we weren't. We're actually a whole, full age range, from babies up to, out the door. And Maple Ridge has been fantastic. It's a great place. We love working with the local municipality there. And I think you'll see us doing more business in the Lower Mainland, in other locations there. I think next to that, I don't know, they've been good areas. What's super weird for us is that we're a business that actually is hugely affected by some of the stuff that we see going on with climate or changing weather patterns. So we can be in a market. We were in Kelowna as an example. And what we were finding was that, 2 to 3 weeks out of every year in our peak season, it was terrible because of fire smoke and smoke in the air. And, that just made it a very difficult model. And also everyone thought they wanted to be there. So the market became oversaturated. So it can be hard to figure out, what the right place is. The variables that affect our business are substantial, probably more than any other business that I know. Which again, going back to that first moment where I was looking at the business plan for this is going to be hard. I was damn right. Like it's very much a hard business. Yeah.
Yeah. Recreation is a hard business. I looked at acquiring a 100-year-old Vancouver Island business related to recreation on the manufacturing side. And I'm like, oh, manufacturing is a hard business. And then I said to myself, recreation is a hard business. And I decided not to purchase it. The business is still operating under a new owner, but thriving is a challenge with seasons and like you said, the environment changing.
Yeah, and discretionary spending, right? So if things are going to get tough, right, am I going to put gas in my car? Like right now, it's a super interesting time, and I guess it's a good thing I'm old enough and have enough sort of runway behind me that I can look back and go, I remember, I think it was in early 2000s when we had, a gas issue. Something was going on with fuel prices, and it hugely affected. At that point, we might have only had our Nanaimo operation, or we had Nanaimo in Victoria, and it hugely affected our business. Like people were just like, we're not going to spend the money in gas costs to go to this place to do this thing. And, we're seeing that again this year where it's like, because of this stuff that's going on in the Middle East, we're seeing people are clamping down a bit. They're definitely concerned, and they should be. Like, I get it, So, but for us, right, being a community-focused business, it's an opportunity in that we can, change how we're pricing and do things that actually encourage people to get out there. So yeah, you got to blow off some steam. Might as well do it with us.
Yeah, good, good. Are there any professional business mentors here on Vancouver Island that you look up to, or new up and comers that you can think of who our audience should check out? Or
yeah, I'm really lucky that, someone talked me into actually Scott Phillips, who, is at the helm at Starfish, talked me into coming into the Entrepreneurs Organization. And he talked me into that. That's 15 years ago now. So at least, and said, hey, I think this would be really good for you. And I kind of went in kicking and screaming. I, had built a career being pretty much on my own. There were times in the guiding industry when I had mentors. Hans Moser, who was the founder of CMH Heli Skiing, was one of the people that spent time with me and helped me to see my way forward. And much of what he, shared with me 35, 40 years ago is still so true. In fact, becoming truer in some ways. But I think the Entrepreneurs Organization has been a really great way for me to have access to people who have, if I haven't done it, someone in there has. And even locally within the local chapter, there's a lot of mentors in there, and their mentoring program is pretty solid. So and the cool thing there was I had folks that if I was trying to do something specific, like raising capital or whatever, there'd be people that would they'd have a very specific expertise that they could share with me, perhaps while I was dealing with what I was dealing with, and then we didn't need to keep going. And so, Scott has definitely been a mentor for me. Another fellow named Yarden, who's, got a strong financial background. He's been a mentor. I don't think I could list them all, because there's just, sometimes it's like, it's the one conversation that you have. You have this one conversation, or maybe two or three, but you could not pay for that education. It's just someone has done the work. And, I can think of times where, probably not so much in terms of my industry. There's just not a lot of expertise in my industry, but it's like the general business issues are helpful. I mean, Kael, at times you've helped me, right, with just some of the things that we've been looking at and telling me, no, that's a dumb idea, or that's a good idea, or whatever. No, but really valuable, right? And I think that's what I see on Vancouver Island as well, is that there's a lot of willingness to do that. I'd also shout out Ian Chisholm of the Roy Group. Ian is, he really promotes mentorship. And that's at the core of what he does. He's just got a really strong purpose to see that become something that's championed everywhere. He does a really good job of it. And I love getting together with him and just, hearing his thoughts and getting energized to go out and actually make a difference. And I think I love mentoring as well. I've had some really great folks that have allowed me to share my experience that maybe is of value to them. And I think there needs to be more of that.
Yeah. Good. Great. And you've seen a lot of business in other parts of North America and the globe, but is there any business or services you would love to see started here on Vancouver Island? Maybe like something you see that's succeeding somewhere else in the world that you almost wish you wanted to, but you might not have the expertise, or other business owners or things you've used for your other parks?
I think transportation is something that we don't have super dialed here. I think there are a lot of opportunities with that, and where we do have some of it, I think it's just a little, maybe it's monopolized, or it's just not, that's not a good word. That's not really what I mean to say. It's just, there's not enough.
It's okay. We don't have a Google.
Yeah. It's not,
of transportation.
There's when you look around and you travel, you can see all these different opportunities for how people are moving people around, or giving people the opportunity to move around. I think we're going to see, having worked in tech here and seeing tech just growing stronger and stronger on Vancouver Island, one, because it's a great place if you're a brainiac to come and live. But, I think transportation is one of the key places that I would say is really, I'd like to see more of here. I'd also like to see more industry specific sort of vocational training on the island, or at least have it be more obvious. there isn't really training for our industry. We have to do all the training in-house. It would be awesome to start seeing colleges, training folks for our industry. And it's a growing industry. There's a lot of people out there that are being employed in our industry. And again, I think Vancouver Island would be a great opportunity for that. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Good. Any aspects of transportation that have really helped your business? I know in parts of the Lower Mainland, the bike share programs are huge, but any specifics that you think or you've seen work really well?
I think, public transportation, I think the other thing, and when I say public transportation, I mean where you've got transportation en masse, where folks can actually hop into something regular, whether it's tourism related or it's the standard public transportation. I think that's been really helpful for us. I would say car share or car, like like Moto and some of these other providers, I think is great in some locations, and it's certainly been good. I'd love to see more of that here. And you're seeing a lot more people that are going, yeah, I don't want to have a car. I don't need to have a car, especially as we become sort of more urban centric. So I think more opportunity. For example, the other day, my son said, hey, I want to go camping. I'm going to go out. I want to spend a few days out there, but I don't have a car. He doesn't have a car. He doesn't believe he doesn't want to have a car. He's like, well, can you give me your drive? And I took him out there, and I was starting to think, how would someone who is an urbanite make this accessible? And it's like, it's very difficult. And I think there's a bunch of opportunities there that we're not quite, it shouldn't be $100 cab ride out to, take to spend your $30 on a campsite or whatever. Anyway, I think that's a big opportunity. I think some sort of transportation or ride sharing, like better ride sharing tools. Yeah. Would be good.
I feel like it's coming a little bit. There was a startup, I think, in the Whistler Squamish Quarter or Vancouver Pop Ride, and I think they've been trying to do a little bit marketing here. I think they were heavily damaged by COVID, but we'll see if they come back. And then we do have the new bike share, and then there's 2 to 3 car shares. Was it Mondo or coming out of BCAA? And but yeah, volume, right? You want to have the volume to help people get to your business and help people experience Vancouver Island.
Yeah, I think there's a whole bunch of reasons why there should be focus on that. I think there's ways to reduce our impact by doing that as well. But I think there's kind of this spin. It's like spinning a wheel or getting the flywheel going, right? It's like it reduces the impact if you do it right. But also when people are getting out and they're getting out of the urban environment and they're getting into natural spaces, then they kind of realize what that means for their health, their mental health, for everything about that physical, like just movement. And then, that creates more demand and away you go. So I think, part of it is, and maybe I get it. As business, we go, well, if the numbers aren't there, and I just said that earlier in this conversation, if the numbers aren't there, it's difficult to go there. But if we wait till the numbers are there, it's kind of like having a great idea. If you wait until if someone tells you about a great idea, it's already done, right? Like that baby's done, right? It's not, I have this great idea, no one else has thought of it. It's like, no, they have. And probably by the time you're, putting your sticks in the ground, someone's already doing it. So, yeah.
Yeah, but it's interesting in this day and age, the ability to do research to minimal viable product, iteration. I'm not a big fan of move fast and break things, but I'm a fan of try things. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a real argument for experimentation. There's no question. Yeah, and it's something, internally I'm seeing it in my business because we're a risk management focused organization. We have to be good at managing risk. We have to be good at, engineering and designing in a way that provides a great experience, that gives a perception of risk, but doesn't extend too much risk. You tend to see a mentality in your culture that is risk averse. And that same risk aversion can actually end up in, how you look at what you're going to do with the business, how you're going to move this thing forward. And I think that experimentation, right, clever experimentation or a process of making experimentation be okay is really important for businesses if they're going to evolve or disrupt or do whatever. And I think when we look at it as experimentation, we go, well, it's okay. We can take a chance. It's just an experiment, right? When everyone thinks it's like, well, we do this and then it's done and it's carved in stone, it's like everyone gets kind of like, oh, that's scaring me. Let's not do that. But if it's just an experiment, it's, in the guiding realm, I remember we used to, or I used to, I don't know if everyone else did, but I would say, you'd be approaching a steep face. And from a distance, it looked like, my God, that's terrifying. Or it's like really, really intimidating. And it was just foreshortening. And as you got closer to it, you realize it's like, oh, it's only, 50 degrees and it's really not so bad. So it was always like, just go poke your nose into it, right? And then take a next step and poke your nose, keep poking your nose into it. And I think in business, like when you have that mentality, when you know you can retreat, when you know it's just an experiment, it's like, yeah. So you could fail forward a little bit. It's okay.
Excellent. And where can listeners find and connect with you?
Well, I'm pretty easy to find on LinkedIn. I just find Tom Benson. I'm not the guy that owns the baseball team or the football team or the hockey team or all of the sports centers, but
Not yet.
No, probably not ever. But yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn. That's the best way, or through the company website at wildplay.com. And if folks do reach out to me on LinkedIn, I'm pretty slow in responding on that platform. I'm not a big social media guy, and I'm not a big, keep up the communication. But I love hearing from people, and I love supporting people in any way that I can, particularly locally. It's great. Yeah.
Yeah. Great. Well, thanks so much for giving me a deeper dive on some of your operations. I've obviously been to the Langford Park, but I hadn't. The former owner had given me a free bungee jump, and I'm like, I like jumping off of cliffs into water, but I'm not going to drive up to Nanaimo. I usually go all the way to Courtenay or all the way to Tofino. So definitely, I'm going to stop. I'm going to bring the family to Nanaimo since I know there's more than bungee jumping, and I might just take you up on the company, the CEO bungee jump you guys do once a year. I'm not going to do the naked one, but I think there's a CEO bungee jump you do once a year.
Yeah, it's great. It's been super successful, and the money is all raised for brain injuries, and it's actually been really, really successful. Yeah. So yeah, I reach out, man. We'll get you set up, and even if that's not what you choose to do, reach out and I'll help get you set up, and I would love to.
That's good. So Toss the Boss fundraiser for brain injuries, and when is that?
That is in, I believe, October this year. Yeah, and that's for the Nanaimo Brain Injury Society, and they do a they've done really, really well with that. And then our other is the Naked Bungee, which is in early spring, late winter, and that is for mental health, and was primarily for schizophrenia earlier on, and now it's kind of a broader mental health thing, and it's been very successful. We've raised well over $1 million for that charity alone. Yeah.
Great. Well, love to see that. Kind of in the heart of Vancouver Island, it can bring the north, south, and west, and west Vancouver Island all together. So thank you for putting those on and giving back to the community, Tom.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me and for acknowledging that.